I'm 75 now, and I can't remember anybody except the Queen bee.
The announcement lasted less than 2 minutes, but it changed the atmosphere inside Buckingham Palace instantly. King Charles did not raise his voice. He did not offer a long explanation. With his hands resting beside a sealed palace file, the monarch confirmed that Camilla would permanently leave her official royal apartments, surrender her operational palace role, and make one final ceremonial exit before withdrawing from public palace life. Then, he stopped speaking, and no one in the room dared move. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles had summoned a restricted circle to the 1844 room before dawn. The chamber is used for important royal meetings, making its silence heavier. William sat rigidly at the table's end. Anne watched her brother closely. Camilla remained nearest to the king, yet seemed impossibly distant. The decision was precise. The queen consort would leave her Buckingham Palace apartments, surrender control of her staff, relinquish her daily palace role, and depart through the central entrance. It was no ordinary doorway. It was the palace's most public exit, where her departure could not be hidden. Camilla did not argue. She tightened her fingers around the chair and kept her face still. Charles continued reading, but the final paragraph defeated him. His voice weakened before he placed the file flat on the table. The monarch had spoken with authority. The husband beneath that authority looked deeply wounded. William noticed something the others had missed. 2 dates appeared on the order. One belonged to that terrible morning. The other had been written 3 weeks earlier. He understood the decision was not sudden. The prince looked toward his father, but the king refused to meet his eyes. Anne leaned closer and found a handwritten amendment beneath the final page. Camilla's private keys, security credentials, and palace seals had to be returned before sunset on departure day. Palace seals are official marks used to approve royal household business. Their surrender meant the exit was not ceremonial. It was complete. After the officials departed, Camilla remained behind. She asked Charles whether he had already chosen the route. He answered, "The central doors." Her eyes dropped because both knew what that meant. Everyone would see her go. William reached the corridor when a senior equerry pressed another envelope into his hand. An equerry is a trusted officer who assists senior royals. Across the front were 5 chilling words. Background to the sovereign's decision. The palace had heard the verdict, but the people trapped inside it still did not know which wound had forced the king to deliver it. To the public, this was the fall of a queen consort. To Charles, it was the collapse of the partnership that had carried him through decades of judgment, scandal, waiting, and finally the throne. To William, it was a test of whether family loyalty could survive royal duty. And to Anne, it was the moment sentiment could no longer be allowed to govern the crown. Each entered the crisis carrying a different truth. Only one could shape the monarchy's future. Charles remained divided. Camilla had been his closest companion through years of uncertainty. Yet the king believed her palace presence threatened the order he had sworn to protect. The crown meant the institution of monarchy, and private love could not weaken its command. Camilla's position as queen consort meant she was the sovereign's wife, not an independent ruler. William carried another burden. As heir, the person next in line to the throne, he had to defend the monarchy's future. But the prince understood that humiliating Camilla would wound his father. Duty demanded distance. Family demanded mercy. Camilla returned alone to her sitting room and removed the pearl brooch worn during the announcement. She placed it beside a framed photograph of Charles, then turned the picture face down. She did not cry. Silence felt safer. Anne found her brother in the corridor and asked whether he was certain. Charles answered that certainty had vanished weeks earlier, but necessity had not. The Princess Royal, the title given to the monarch's eldest daughter, heard the grief in his voice. She touched his arm once, then let him walk away. William opened the envelope. Inside were references to a cancelled private audience, an unauthorized household instruction, and a disputed order concerning Catherine's future palace role. A private audience is a confidential meeting with the sovereign. The papers showed that Camilla's exit was not punishment for one angry moment. It followed a struggle over who controlled the royal household during Charles's absences. Catherine found William beside a darkened window, the papers trembling in his hand. He told her, "Whatever is in this file, my father has already paid for it." She took his hand but did not ask him to stop reading. Camilla summoned her longtime dresser and requested 3 traveling cases. When the woman began to cry, she replied, "Not yet. We will do that after the doors close." Then William reached the final line. It pointed to a private ceremony at Windsor, where an order had been issued in Charles's name without his approval. The final exit had been announced in London, but its true beginning lay inside a locked Windsor chamber, where one unauthorized sentence changed everything. 3 weeks before the palace announcement, the royal family gathered at Windsor for what should have been a quiet investiture rehearsal. Charles was delayed in another wing, William was speaking with military aides, and Catherine was preparing to enter the chamber. Then a message arrived bearing the authority of the sovereign. It ordered the princess to step back from the ceremony and transferred her place to Camilla. The instruction appeared official. The problem was devastatingly simple. The king had never given it. Catherine stood beside her assigned place for the national service. An investiture rehearsal was a practice for a ceremony honoring service. Her position beside Charles mattered, because it signaled responsibility passing toward the next generation. The Lord Chamberlain entered carrying a written instruction. He was the senior official responsible for palace ceremonies. The message stated that Camilla would replace Catherine because the king had changed the order of precedence, the formal ranking deciding where royals stand. Catherine read the page without protest, but William saw her face lose color. She stepped away and asked whether his father was unwell. The prince knew she feared more than embarrassment. Someone was interfering with the monarchy's future. Camilla entered and understood the damage. She saw Catherine near the rear doors and William watching with disbelief. Yet the queen consort refused to reverse the change. She insisted the household obey the instruction. Charles arrived before the rehearsal began. He noticed Catherine standing apart and demanded an explanation. When the Lord Chamberlain handed him the order issued through Camilla's office, the king read it twice. Then he declared, "I authorized no such order." Silence crushed the room. Charles ordered every aide outside. Alone with Camilla, he asked whether she believed she possessed the right to speak with sovereign authority. She answered that she had protected continuity during his absence. The monarch stared at her, sensing more. Camilla admitted during that conversation that this was not the first instruction she had approved on his behalf. She had delayed briefing papers and redirected 2 meetings tied to William's transition planning. Charles removed his glasses, folded the unauthorized order once, and placed it inside his coat. "You have mistaken proximity to the crown for possession of it," he said. Anne later found Catherine alone in St. George's Hall. The Princess Royal heard her say she could endure humiliation, but feared what the order meant for William's future. Anne promised the truth would not remain buried. That evening, Charles demanded a complete audit of Camilla's palace office. The Windsor order broke the king's trust, but the files opened afterward revealed that the breach had already spread through the heart of the household. Charles waited until every aide had left. No secretaries, no equerries, no witnesses who could soften what was about to be said. Camilla entered expecting another procedural discussion, but the king had placed the Windsor order, the household audit, and her palace keys in a straight line across the desk. She understood immediately. This was not a conversation about correcting mistakes. It was the final confrontation between a husband who felt betrayed and a wife who believed she had been abandoned. Charles opened the audit and read from its documented findings. A household audit was a formal review of who issued orders, moved papers, and controlled palace work. The file showed that Camilla's office had expanded its reach whenever he was absent, exhausted, or receiving private medical advice. Several instructions carried his authority without his approval. The damage ran deeper than ceremony. None of those actions changed constitutional law, the rules defining how the monarchy operates, but they confused command, disrupted William's planning, and made the palace appear divided between competing centers of power. Charles accused Camilla of turning his weakness into permission. Camilla struck back. She said officials had already begun shifting their loyalty toward William and Catherine, while the king still occupied the throne. She had waited years to stand beside him, endured judgment, and survived rejection. Yet once she entered the palace, she felt everyone treated her place as temporary. Charles pushed the Windsor order toward her. "Did you use my name because you feared losing your place?" Camilla held his gaze. "I used it because no one listened when I used my own." The king closed his eyes. "Then you should have spoken to me." Camilla's anger broke into humiliation. During that private conversation, she disclosed that a senior courtier had warned her Catherine would soon inherit several palace patronages. A patronage is an official link between a royal and a charity or institution. She refused to name the person who had fed her fear. Charles then admitted his own hidden plan. He had intended a gradual transition, not her removal. William and Catherine would receive more duties, but Camilla would retain dignity and purpose. The unauthorized order destroyed that path, because it turned succession planning into betrayal. Camilla lifted the palace keys and held them tightly. Then she set them down one at a time. The final key struck the desk like a verdict. Before leaving, she gave Charles one last warning. The courtier who had encouraged her still had access to William's household and shaped future decisions. Charles had ended the argument with his wife, but the hidden influence behind her decisions was still moving freely through the palace. The monarchy was not threatened by marching crowds or an open rebellion. Its danger came from briefing folders, changed schedules, whispered warnings, and officials who understood how to move power without ever appearing to touch it. William now faced the machinery behind the crisis. Someone had convinced Camilla that her survival depended on resisting Catherine's rise. Someone had also allowed the king's authority to be used as a weapon. The prince needed a name, but Charles needed something harder, proof that his household still obeyed one sovereign. William opened the correspondence connecting Camilla's office, senior planners, and the private secretariat. The private secretariat was the team that managed the sovereign's papers and decisions. Across the messages, the prince found warnings that Catherine's new duties would leave the queen consort without influence, staff, or purpose. Anne read the same pages and understood the danger. She explained that the crown depended on one clear chain of command. Once rival offices issued instructions in the monarch's name, even a dispute over ceremony could fracture trust across the household. William felt anger toward Camilla, but he refused to call the crisis simple jealousy. He knew someone had targeted her oldest fear, that the palace would never accept her. The future king could condemn her choice without ignoring the weakness used against her. Charles faced another pain alone. He reviewed the original announcement and crossed out a cold sentence describing Camilla's departure as an administrative restructuring. That phrase meant a change in duties and staff. The king replaced it with words honoring her years of service, because punishment, he believed, must not become cruelty. The messages finally produced a name. Sir Malcolm Harrow, a senior planning advisor, had repeatedly warned Camilla that William would dismantle her household after the next state ceremony. A state ceremony was a national event involving the monarch and government. William summoned Harrow and placed the printed messages before him. The advisor defended his actions as palace tradition. The prince cut him off. Tradition did not write these words. You did. Harrow then admitted during the recorded disciplinary meeting that he had exaggerated the transition plans. He believed conflict between the two royal households would preserve his influence. Camilla's fear had become his instrument. Anne watched him surrender his security pass. She felt no triumph, only disgust. One man's ambition had helped destroy Charles's trust in the woman beside him. Charles removed Harrow, but he did not reverse Camilla's exit. Manipulation explained her fear. It did not excuse using sovereign authority without consent. The man who fed the conflict was gone, yet his removal could not stop the palace from dismantling Camilla's world room by room. The consequences did not arrive with trumpets or public declarations. They arrived as labels on packing crates. A name vanished from a staff rota. A private telephone stopped ringing. Security officers requested badges that had opened palace doors for years. Camilla had expected the pain of leaving Charles's official world, but she had not expected the speed with which that world could reorganize itself without her. By afternoon, the queen consort was still inside Buckingham Palace, yet the institution had already begun treating her as someone who had departed. Camilla watched the household move at once. Her official letters were redirected. Her staff received reassignment notices, and future engagements passed to other working royals. A staff rota was the schedule showing who served where, and every altered line proved that her authority was being removed before she had even packed. Catherine received 2 ceremonial duties, once managed through Camilla's office. The princess accepted them only after asking that the announcement avoid words that might deepen the queen consort's humiliation. She understood why the transfer mattered, but she refused to celebrate another woman's fall. Camilla entered her office and found assistants lifting briefing binders from the shelves. She told them to continue, then stepped into the adjoining room. Only there did she allow the tears to come. Charles heard that she had refused lunch and walked toward her apartments. The king stopped before reaching the door. Entering as her husband could weaken the decision he had made as sovereign, the person holding the crown's final authority. He turned away, carrying grief no order could hide. One sealed case created another crisis. It contained private letters exchanged between Charles and Camilla before their marriage. Officials asked whether the case belonged to the royal archive, the official collection preserving monarchy records, or to their private past. Charles answered in writing. The letters would be returned unopened. He was ending Camilla's palace power, not erasing the history they had shared. Camilla's longtime dresser carried out the final ceremonial gown. She touched its sleeve and remembered when Charles had first seen it. "Pack that one last," she said. William received the revised court circular, the official list of royal engagements, and saw Catherine's name where Camilla's had once appeared. The prince felt no victory. Succession was moving forward through someone else's loss. Catherine later visited Camilla alone. She said she had never wanted advancement to arrive through another woman's public fall. The queen consort answered, "Advancement never asks how it arrives." As the palace stripped away her authority, Camilla discovered that her final act could still determine whether she left in bitterness or with dignity before the final door closed. For the first time since the crisis began, there were no officials in the room and no documents between them. Charles entered Camilla's sitting room after midnight and found her beside 3 closed traveling cases. She had removed every royal insignia except her wedding ring. The king expected anger, perhaps one final demand that he reverse the order. Instead, she offered him a decision of her own. She would leave exactly as commanded, but she would not allow the monarchy to turn their marriage into a public execution. Camilla spoke without bitterness. She would not challenge the exit order, leak private conversations, or force Charles into a constitutional battle. A constitutional battle meant a struggle over the rules and authority governing the monarchy. She knew that remaining inside the palace would deepen the damage and turn private grief into public warfare. Charles confirmed what would remain. Her private residence, personal protection, and place within the family would continue. What ended was her operational authority, meaning the power to direct palace staff, issue instructions, and shape official business. Camilla told him the cruelest loss was not the rooms, the ceremonies, or the staff. It was knowing that his final act toward her as sovereign would be an order to leave. The words struck Charles harder than accusation. The king admitted he had delayed the decision because he feared becoming the man who finally gave her a place and then took it away. Camilla answered that the place became dangerous when she tried to possess it. Silence settled between them. Camilla then asked whether he still believed she had loved him rather than the crown. Charles took her hand and said love was exactly why the betrayal had wounded him beyond politics. She did not look away. Camilla offered, during that private conversation, to record a short farewell address accepting responsibility for crossing the limits of her office. She refused to let Charles carry the entire public burden of explaining her departure. She also named the fear Harrow had exploited, the belief that the palace would discard her once William and Catherine rose. Yet she would not blame the advisor completely. The unauthorized Windsor order had still been her choice. Charles reached toward her wedding ring but did not remove it. He pressed his thumb against the band and whispered, "This stays." Camilla nodded. For the first time, they separated their marriage from the palace. Before dawn, Charles approved the farewell plan. Camilla closed the case, knowing their agreement would soon belong to everyone outside. Husband and wife had reached their private truth, but beyond the palace gates, the world was preparing a verdict of its own. By sunrise, the secret was no longer contained within palace walls. Broadcasters interrupted scheduled programs. Newspaper presses produced late editions. Crowds gathered behind the barriers outside Buckingham Palace, uncertain whether they were witnessing disgrace, retirement, or the end of one of the monarchy's most complicated love stories. Then the central doors opened. Camilla appeared alone for 3 seconds, before Charles stepped into view behind her. In that single image, Britain saw both the authority of the crown and the private cost demanded from those who stand closest to it. The palace released a formal statement before the car moved. It confirmed that Camilla was ending active residence and operational duties at Buckingham Palace, following the king's household decision. Operational duties meant the daily authority to direct staff, approve schedules, and manage official work. The statement praised continuity, constitutional clarity, and her public service, but it said nothing about Windsor or the unauthorized orders. Britain divided almost at once. Some people saw accountability, a necessary response when royal authority had been crossed. Others saw a woman who had endured decades of hostility, reached the institution she fought to join, and was now leaving it under unbearable judgment. Charles watched the first television coverage alone. A broadcaster described the departure as a marital rejection. The king switched off the screen and said, "They will never understand the difference." He knew the marriage remained, even if palace power did not. The London Chronicle captured the public mood most sharply. Its fictional morning edition carried a full-width photograph of Camilla beneath the headline, "The Final Palace Door." She raised one gloved hand, while Charles stood several paces behind, close enough to show loyalty and distant enough to show command. Outside Buckingham Palace, the crowd fell silent as the royal car crossed the gates. One elderly woman lowered a small Union flag and began to cry. Broadcasters replayed that moment because it expressed what arguments could not: sadness without innocence, punishment without triumph. Camilla's recorded farewell message followed. In the statement, she admitted acting beyond the authority entrusted to her, apologized to Charles, William, and Catherine, and declared that service must never become possession. Catherine watched beside William. When Camilla spoke her name, the princess exhaled and reached for his hand. The prince held it tightly. Neither celebrated. Anne then ordered the household to preserve Camilla's charitable work and ceremonial record in the Royal Archive, the official collection protecting royal history. Consequence, she insisted, must not become erasure. Now they had to decide what loyalty would mean after loss. The gates closed behind Camilla's car, leaving one final question, not for the public, but for the family that remained inside. When the central doors closed, the palace returned to its routines. Briefing boxes arrived. Engagements were approved. Footsteps crossed the same corridors Camilla had walked only hours earlier. The monarchy had preserved its chain of authority, but preservation did not feel like victory. Charles had defended the crown by removing the woman who had shared his longest struggle. Camilla had lost her palace life but recovered the dignity to admit where fear had led her. And the family left behind understood that duty can save an institution while still breaking human hearts. Camilla settled at her private country residence and made no attempt to reclaim palace authority. She continued a small number of personal charitable commitments, but without an operational royal household, meaning the staff structure that manages official duties and decisions. Her public role had narrowed, and she accepted that boundary. Charles remained her husband. He visited privately, yet the separation between marriage and monarchy became permanent. The king kept her empty chair in his sitting room for several days. Finally, he asked that it be moved beside the window rather than removed. Love, he had learned, could remain even when shared power could not. Camilla opened the last traveling case and found the ceremonial gown she had asked to pack last. She could have kept it as proof of everything lost. Instead, the queen consort donated it to the royal collection, the official archive preserving historic clothing and objects, with a note honoring the years she served beside the monarch. William and Catherine accepted expanded duties without triumph. The prince became more cautious about those surrounding the future crown. The princess insisted that no transition should ever depend on deliberate humiliation. Together, they carried forward a lesson written through another woman's fall. Anne restored one clear chain of command. The Princess Royal also protected Camilla's charitable record, proving that accountability did not require cruelty. Charles later placed the Windsor Order, the audit, and the farewell statement inside the royal archive. Beneath them, he wrote, "Authority borrowed without consent becomes betrayal, even when fear is the reason." Weeks later, Charles visited Camilla at her country home. He offered his arm. She accepted it. They walked forward as husband and wife, not sovereign and consort. Camilla entered the palace believing acceptance would end her struggle. She left knowing belonging to the monarch was never the same as possessing the crown. Nobody won. Yet the ending was complete. The marriage endured. Divided authority ended, and the monarchy moved forward under one unbroken command. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.